Helen, can you see my screen?
They don't always do it, but we'll
Okay,
some stuff
excellent.
tonight. I'll set up those, so.
Okay, I think we're ready to roll.
Yeah.
Back up on my stuff. Here,
Thank you.
guys.
One,
Oh, it's just incredible.
your controller's always there.
Oh,
Sweet.
Mouse and keyboard, I'll be right back.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
I don't know.
I know that more people have scattered at the moment, but they're recording it, so it's great. And I was asked to do a military report class by Amanda Charles. I was in a train the presenter class with Keller Williams, and I did a 10-minute spiel on this. And they asked me if I could put together a class to teach Keller Williams completely. And so Helen knows me, and she knows military pretty well. So it's cool that she's still here too. And then Zoe, I've worked with Zoe a lot. And I'm excited to be here to talk about military. And so this was initially the flyer and what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about how to build some trust. And then just a disclaimer, every military member is different. This is just going to cover the basics on phrases, different ways to connect, and to make them feel heard and seen, because that's one of the things that I realized that is really important to military members. We love to share our story. And then I'm just going to go over some common terms, some common misunderstandings, and how to better serve your VA clients so that they feel heard and seen. So once you get your PCS orders and your return no later than date is locked in, you want to check your LES to make sure your BAH aligns with you before you decide whether you're going on base or off. If you're dual mill or coming off a TDY and planning to use your VA, just make sure your COE is squared away, especially if you're rated, because that could impact your funding fee. A lot of terms in there. As a military member, I completely understand exactly everything that's going on in this. And if you were able to communicate to a military member this way, they would feel extremely confident that you understand who they are, what they need, and what they need to get done, and that could help make the process go a lot smoother. There are a lot of terms, and when we have to continuously explain, what does PCS mean? What does LES mean? What does this mean? Consistently, that could degrade the level of confidence that that military member has in you. But I just wanted to throw this out there as an example of a paragraph or a conversation that could happen between you and your VA clients.
Do you have a list of acronyms?
Oh, yes,
Military
we'll get there.
acronyms? Do you?
Yep,
Okay.
we'll get there.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Using this computer. Okay, so what do I know? I've been serving in the military for over 19 years now. Really close to retirement. I am a combat veteran. I've deployed multiple times. I am 100% rated disability, permanent and total. So I've gone through the VA disability process. I know the benefits. I have been supervising military members since 2011. And I've been stationed all over. And I am also a mortgage lender with Focus on Lending. And so I've seen both sides of it, where having to communicate those specific terms in relation to real estate transactions, and how to connect with the military member, and them literally saying to me, wow, you understand, you're helping this process go really smoothly because I don't have to explain anything to you. And when I realized that, I'm like, this is something that I didn't even think about because I've lived it for the last 19 years. But to them, it's new, and they're also in a new location. Like whenever I moved up here to Alaska, I had never been to Alaska. I moved 3,000 miles away from my home. I didn't know anybody. And the first person that I had interaction with was who was going to help me get into my home. So how many of you guys know anybody who's military? Yeah, in Alaska, 1 in 8 people that you're going to meet has some connection to military. And so that's why this class is also very necessary, because it allows us to widen our scope of people that we can talk to, and that you're probably going to interact with multiple military related individuals. What is the first thing that comes to mind the moment you realize your new client?
Well, they're eligible for the VA loan, which is the lowest money that's out there, or the most competitive rate that's out there as a general.
What about you? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you realize your client's military?
Moved a lot.
Moves a lot. Nice. One of the things that I've also learned is that not all military members are eligible. And the reason being is because with Guard and Reserve members, you have to have served a certain amount of time. Even with active duty, you've had to have served at least 3 years. Guard and Reserve is 6 years. In order to be eligible for your VA loan. It also depends on their discharge. Discharge is their DD 214, which is their discharge paperwork that says whether they discharge under honorable conditions. If they were discharged under non-honorable conditions, they are not eligible.
Yes, ma'am.
And so understanding that, being able to communicate through that, because the last thing you want to do is find out that you have a military member and say, oh yeah, you're eligible for this, and then find out that they're not. Keep going to the wrong computer. So the military identity. So we have our different forces over here. We have Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Space Force, and Coast Guard. And yes, Space Force is a legitimate agency now. And I know that in other services will often, like we joke, we are allowed to, we feel like it's kind of like one of those, you have to be in the military in order to make fun of other services type of thing. But as soon as somebody who's not in the military starts making fun of the other services, it kind of feels weird. And then there's other people who are not military, or current active military or current active guard, who also identify with the military. Veterans, who are no longer serving, but are a veteran. Spouses, ex-spouses, and widows. Children. Children often identify, and these are also people who also can get benefits. Grandparents, distant cousin coming around for the benefits. I just threw that one in there for some giggles because sometimes they'll say, hey, my cousin was or they'll try to be like, oh, my stepbrother had these benefits, or my stepfather or somebody had these benefits. Can I scoop off of their benefits? And you got to be able to figure out which ones are legitimately eligible for the benefits, because everybody tries to get a hold of that zero down VA loan.
Of course.
You have a question?
Zero down. I was thinking,
Okay.
of course, zero down is great.
Yeah. Death by acronyms. We live by them. Every branch has their own. The terms that I have to share with you guys are ones that are consistent across all branches. But just know that, like, sometimes an acronym on the Army side might be different from an acronym on the Air Force side. For example, AFSC. AFSC is specific to Air Force. It's our Air Force Specialty Code. It's what our job is. If you find out that your client is Air Force and you say, hey, what's your MOS? You immediately think that you only know what Army is and that you don't see us as something different. For the Army, it's MOS, your Military Operations Specialty, your job. So it's whatever your job is. But in the Air Force, it's AFSC, which is your specialty code. If somebody said that, I'm Air Force, by the way, Air National Guard. So if somebody asked me what their MOS was, I would be like, you have no idea what their MOS is like. But if somebody came up to me and said, hey, what's your AFSC? I'm like, you know that I'm Air Force. And so it feels good. It's just that kind of.
If you don't know what they are, is there a way you can ask that question and be safe?
Yeah. Well, once you get to know your client and they say that they're in the military, say what branch.
Okay.
Ask them what branch. And then they'll probably share a story.
You want to get a little bit better camera if you're on that side. Like, just a bit. It's gonna be.
Some people-
here the whole-
Helen knows my face.
Yeah.
And so the cost of not knowing, sometimes the loss of confidence, like I talked about earlier, whenever having to repeat ourselves or re-explain something. So like one thing that would be cool to see is if you're sitting down with your client and you're asking them what a term means that they say, write it down. If I see you write it down, I feel like you're involved, you care, and you want to learn instead of asking me to repeat later when I say it again. So yeah, the frustration of having to constantly explain what we feel is basic. The quick activity that I had, as I learned from the presenter class that we had, was, everybody, with a group, which is only 3 of you instead of partners, is, write down the military terms that you already know, and then share them with your partner. But since there's just 3 of you guys here, tell me a term that you know.
Mostly cuss words.
Any acronyms that you guys know?
J-Bear,
Jaber?
that's one. Not really.
Other relevant acronyms? Any from the paragraph that I put on top at first? I can go back to it. Maybe. There we go. So do you know any of these
Yeah,
terms?
of course, yep. What is RNLTD?
Return no later than date.
Okay.
Or report no later than date. There's 2 different ones. Depends on the context.
EAA, yeah. Certificate of eligibility, I know that one.
TDY is vacation, but I don't know what those specific ones are.
A TDY is a temporary duty location.
I see.
And so sometimes in the military, we'll refer to them as vacations depending on where the location is. So like if I say, hey, I'm going TDY to Hawaii, people would be like, oh, you're going on vacation. But if I say, I'm going TDY to Kuwait for 4 months, not a vacation
Okay.
necessarily. To the Army, that might be a vacation. When I was deployed over in Qatar, Qatar is one of the locations that Air Force would get deployed to. Qatar was also the location where Army soldiers who were deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq would go to Qatar for R&R, rest and relaxation, in between for mid-tour. So like they would be over for 18 months, and mid-tour, they were allowed to go to Qatar for a vacation. And so for an Air Force person, that was a deployment. For an Army person, that was vacation.
So what was your specialty in the Air Force?
I've had a couple. I was originally a photojournalist, and I kept deploying back to back to back 4 times in a row. And I said, please get me out of this. And then I joined the Guard, and I went medical admin in the least deployable position ever. During that time, I did a special duty assignment as I did counterintelligence for the Alaska State Troopers to do drug intelligence, and I was allowed to do that as an analyst, as a counter drug member from the. So basically, like they borrowed me from the Air Force, but it was full time, and then now I'm a nutritionist. So hopefully ending my career soon as a nutritionist. I felt I needed something relevant. So I've been through a variety of military careers, and so I've seen a variety of different types of people in the military. And so being able to gauge how to communicate with somebody who works on the flight line versus somebody who doesn't work on the flight line. And in the Air Force, we have a term for that. It's called a nonner. A nonner is somebody who doesn't work on the flight line in the Air Force. Or a grunt is somebody in the Army who's infantry.
Okay.
So there's a lot of them up here. So if you ever hear the term grunt, that means that it's an Army guy who's infantry, who's ground pounder. Is also another way that they say that.
You know, I heard this week that there is or there is not a BA ceiling for the money that can be size of BA loan that can be given. What's your understanding on that?
So different locations have a different cap. Alaska's cap for a VA member is 1.205. And then some other numbers, I can't remember that off the top of my head. I just know it's 1.2 million, and it's based on the individual. So one of the
1.025?
So 1.2, yeah.
1.25, okay.
205.
So 1,205,000. It changes every year. And we constantly have to make sure that we're at the cap. We do the little calculations in our system to figure out and make sure.
If you go above that amount, can they do they have to, can they pay a certain amount of money is one other thing I
Yep.
understand.
So, the way that works is that if they go over that amount, they have to pay 25% down of that specific amount that's over the allowed amount.
Okay,
It's kind of like if you do a joint VA loan with somebody who's not military. They have to pay 25% down of their portion. So sometimes when we're looking at them, we can debate whether, or we can do all the numbers to see whether it would be better for them to just go conventional or to do the joint, or if the individual themselves can just take on.
So you mean non-military, non-spouse?
Yep. Because the way that you can do the joint VA loan is two military members or two members who have the VA benefits, or a spouse. Outside of that, like if you had a mother-daughter, and let's say the daughter's not military, but the mother was a veteran, you have to do joint VA, and that has to do the 25% down of whatever her portion is. So sometimes it requires a higher down payment, which can be pretty excessive depending on the price range. And in Alaska, it's usually typically high. And so they opt to go conventional or FHA, whatever they can get. Because it's typically cheaper.
And then the 1.205 is their maximum, but that could be any number of different properties up to that.
As long as it's a VA eligible property. Some properties, if it doesn't have running water, the VA is gonna do that. If it's falling apart, the VA is probably gonna do that. So, those different guidelines vary. Again, based on state, and the 1,200,000 is Alaska specific. If you go to another state, the cap is something else.
So what's the difference between single family, multifamily? What is that? Is that balance or that maximum stay the same regardless?
So you'll see a lot of military members who will have a fourplex and then they'll think that they can't use their VA loan again to buy a single family, because they want to turn that one into an investment property. Yeah, as long as we can check their COE balance, their certificate of eligibility, and how much they have left and how much benefit they have left, then we can see if they qualify for the next property, or we can tell them how much they can qualify up to. I'm gonna be faster than this.
LES, what's that stand for?
That is our pay stub. There's a lot on their pay stub, a lot of different things in their pay stub, and a lot that it could tell you based on who they are, like, what they have going on, but typically you can leave that up to your mortgage lender to look at. But if you hear them talk about, yeah, I got some pay stub, or I got some LESs, they won't say pay stubs. Unless they're guard. If they're active duty, they're most likely going to say LES. If they're guard, they may say pay stub, because guard members are, civilians as well. For example, I work 1 week a quarter in my drill unit. That means 1 week a quarter, I am in my military uniform and I'm working military. Outside of that, I'm not working military, I'm not getting paid, I'm not on a pay status. However, I still have to live by the laws of the military. And if I have a troop that requires something, I still have to take care of that. It varies, everybody's schedule varies based on that, and so there are so many different statuses. I could spend a whole day going over different military statuses. If you ever get a guards member or reservist and you have a question about their status, just reach out to me. I'll have my phone number on these slides, and I have business cards that I can give you, because different statuses mean a lot of different things, and if there's some codes on the COE that you don't understand or know, feel free to just shoot it to me. And I'll help you out. Because there's so many of those, I didn't even put them up here because there's different ones. One of the main things that you all will hear, or that you'll notice the difference between, is that I'm a traditional guardsman or I'm an M-Day guardsman, means that I'm 1 week and a month, 2 weeks out of the year. It's not my full-time job. If you hear active guard or AGR, that means that they're full-time. However, their full-time could be ending next month. Never know. Depends on what type of their orders that they have. And there's, like I said, there's numerous different types of orders that a military member could be on if they're guard or reserve.
I have a client that's in the guard and they wouldn't let him use a lot of his income because he renews like monthly or yearly maybe. For what he does, and so they told him that even though he renews and has been renewing for years, they would allow him to use his income because he couldn't show that he had long-term employment. It was weird.
So if you want, you can have them come and talk to me.
Okay.
Because there are ways, so for example, ADOS. I've been on ADOS orders. ADOS orders are in orders that have to end every single September 30th and begin again every October 1st. And you could have a contract that says that you're gonna be with this program for 5 years, but that's not, it's like a soft contract.
Mhm.
Because again, everything depends on funding, but if you have 2 years of history of doing that, they should be able to.
Okay.
And then also how long have they been in the garden, how much time do they have left?
Mhm.
For example, if I started on it and I had my 2 years of doing it, but I'm at 19, it might be questioned. Because you'd be like, well, maybe they're retiring then next.
Mhm.
Well, we hit a thing called sanctuary, where after you hit 18 years, you're in sanctuary, they have to, unless they have a really, really good reason, they have to let you retire. They have to let you reach your 20 years to retire. But before that. So it wasn't letting me.
You can use the arrows on that big great big one too.
That's what I was trying to do and it wasn't letting it,
Didn't like you.
yeah. Um. So related terms are in, I put them in different buckets because there's a lifestyle and urgency type of term. There's financial and housing type of terms, and there's VA loan and benefit type of terms. And at the end of this presentation, I have a QR code that can get you to a cheat sheet that I've created that have all of these different types of terms and phrases and what they mean and how they're useful to you. And it is a working document, so there will be things added to it. Because I wasn't able to complete it before the class today. But it's like got 4 pages of notes on of different types of terms, and I have them broken down into different buckets based on what they are. For example, lifestyle and urgency terms, you'll see PCS, TDY, deployment. They all have timelines associated with them. And different timelines cause different stress or different levels of anxiety or times in which things have to be done. For example, if somebody has their termination leave scheduled or orders, let's say somebody gets orders, they live in Fort Bragg and they just got their orders to Alaska. Now they have their return no later or report no later than date. That R term, RNTLD. And they say that, or let's say they're emailing you and they're talking to you and they put that acronym in there, that means report no later than date is a specific date that they have to be in Alaska. And most of the time, if somebody's contacting you before they even get here, they probably want to have a home before they get here so that they can move their family up. And as soon as they get their orders, they're allowed to move their family up. But I mean, typically they can move their family up beforehand, but nobody typically wants to move their family up until they get the orders because orders can always be pulled back. It's another thing. It's like say somebody gets orders and they get a report no later than date. Then a new president comes in and stops everything. Well, then they're in limbo. And they're stopped and they're probably going to go live in temporary lodging until they can figure it out. Temp lodge. Temporary lodging is lodging on base that is for families who are in transition period. So let's say you do have somebody who's PCSing up to Alaska. They get their orders and their house isn't going to be ready for a month before they get here. Or a month until after they've already arrived. One of the things that you can suggest that puts you on that confidence level of knowing what you're talking about is say, hey, have you checked into temporary lodging to see if you can stay there instead of having to find some place to rent before your house is ready. So like for people who are doing new construction homes, and their build date gets delayed for some reason, or their house just isn't, the people can't move out until 2 weeks after they get to Alaska. Offer them that suggestion that there's temporary lodging on base, and maybe you can look into that. And it's like there's also the Air Force hotel that's on base too. Temporary lodging is really nice though, because it has like 2, 3 bedrooms. And it's better for families with multiple kids and stuff like that. Financial and housing terms, BH, VA, I'm rated, or, PNT. PNT, when somebody is disabled and they refer to their disability as PNT, that means they're permanent and total. That means that they are guaranteed that percentage that they've received for life. And they can never be reevaluated for that. If they're not PNT, their rating could change. That's more important on the lender side, understanding those terms and where that money is coming from. And then one of the other things that I inform my military clients whenever I'm talking to them, if they haven't already done so, if they have a DD 214, which is their discharge paperwork, guardsmen will have DD 214s every time their orders. Not just when they've separated from the military. So they could, like, I have 5 DD 214s and I'm still in. It depends on when their orders end.
How does their disability affect their lending?
If you have a disability, that typically means that you have guaranteed income, and we get a disability letter or a benefits letter stating their rating and the amount that they're getting. And sometimes, that page is also broken down into, let's say, for example, I have 3 children and a parent, and I'm getting benefits on all of them and my spouse. And when the children turn 18, the benefit tapers. And so let's say I have a child who's 16, 15, 14. Well, in 2 years, one of those are going to fall off. So I have to use the lesser amount for qualifying. As long as they have to have at least 3 years of retainability. It's kind of like the PFD. We can only use the PFD if they have more than 2 years of retainability for that child. So that's what the disability earns with that. And then disability is also a non-taxable, and so we get to gross it up. It means we get to add 40%. And then residual income is also based on family members, and the VA requires us to make sure that the individual can still cover family costs and stuff like that. And so that's a calculation that we do as well. All those different things factor into VA specific. And then another thing that is VA specific that surprises some people because they're like, oh, really, that matters, is the VA requires us to ask if they calculate childcare or if they pay for childcare, because we have to take that out of their income as well. Waiting for it to go. If it wants to. Next.
I'm not liking it.
I don't know. Real world applications, just some simple wins. If you like, you don't have to memorize everything. But the more you use it, the more familiar you get with it. Like, are you PCSing here or retiring? Are you planning to use your VA benefit? Because some members know that they can't, some members don't know if they can or not. Do you already have your COE? Some members will know what that means. I would probably say 50% of members will know what the COE is. I didn't learn what the COE was until I got hired. Because I cared about my VA benefits at that time. Acknowledging thank you for your service, but not overdoing it. We're human. There's a difference between members who have not deployed and members who have deployed. And you're never really going to know that on the surface. But there are some members who don't believe that they should be thanked for their service if they've never deployed. And then there's members who have deployed who also don't want to feel like they're bragging about it. And so it's kind of like that sweet spot, just thank you for your service. And then, allow the service member to be heard. We love sharing stories, we love talking about our service. And then there are some members who don't, they just wanna get their benefits in depth. And so that's why I said that there's a wide variety, and just get a feel for it whenever you're having a conversation with them, like, hey, are you getting out soon? How long you plan on serving for? Or how long have you served for? Typically, if you find somebody that you're talking to who's been in for at least 15 years, they're probably gonna go to 20. Or at least they're trying to go to 20. If there's somebody who's just started and maybe 2 to 4 years in, they don't know that. Typically, they don't know that. And we just like to be able to tell our story and talking about our story to somebody who feels like they're actually listening means a lot to us. Because I can talk to my family all day long, but half the time they don't want to hear it. They're hoping I retire soon. But sharing our life with other people draws in that extra closeness, and it makes us feel a little bit more connected to them. Understanding the stress of timelines. Like I said, the report no later than date. Hey, I'm going to UI. I want to get all of this stuff done so that my wife doesn't have to handle all of this while I'm gone. That's a sense of urgency. Ask for when their leave date is. That's a report no later than date versus a return no later than date. A return no later than date is, let's say a spouse says, hey, my husband's going to be back on this date. This is his return no later than date. That means that they're probably a guards member, they're deployed overseas, and they have to be back to home. They have to get back to home station by that date. Do those dates fluctuate? Yes. But let's just say they say, he's coming back and I want to have this all settled before they get back. Just ask them for what their dates are. They don't know. If you say, hey, ask them for their orders. Should be on their orders. Avoid saying VA loans are hard, sellers don't like VA. I've heard those before. Because as soon as you say something like that, it instantly like drops their demeanor. They feel defeated and feel like it's another one of those things that I have to jump through because I'm military. It's kind of like that same concept whenever we're talking about medical. Anytime we do anything with medical, we feel like we have to jump through a million hoops to do it. And as soon as you say something like that, we're gonna feel like we're dealing with TRICARE. And military members get frustrated dealing with TRICARE 99% of the time. And so you don't want to get on that level.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges of working with VA loans from your standpoint that you see?
Hoping in Alaska, specifically, hoping that the property is VA owned. Because, for example, if there's like some type of water issue, or if there's significant damage, or if an ADU isn't qualifying correctly, or there's not permits, or something, the floor is collapsing, finding a property that's VA eligible. But from my perspective, as for mortgage side, is having the member understand that we have to do residual income. They don't necessarily know what that means, and then we have to look at their credit. Half the time it's a credit. It's the military member. They've got like 10 credit cards open, or they just bought a new truck. You get you get a younger member who comes up here, they have COLA, they have all this new income because we're considered overseas up here. And the COLA is non-taxable. And they're like, yes, I'm gonna go buy this. So one of the things that I always tell people up front, and then I tell the realtor up front, make sure they don't buy anything during this time period until they close.
Yeah.
The day after they close, I don't care if they do. But don't buy anything. I've had somebody buy a new truck in the middle of its process, and I had to be like, do you have any other income? And so just reminding them that they can't, just because they have the money, they can't buy it. Understanding a lot of the younger generation I've noticed are like doing these buy now, pay later things. They take their credit. Get firm. Military members are big on just buying stuff all the time. Rent to own stuff.
Only $1,200 truck payment.
And so sometimes they just need our help handholding them through the financial process, because military members, one of the biggest things that challenges that I knew as a new military member, whenever 20 years ago when I was joining the military, was that I joined because I wanted money, and I needed a job, and then all of a sudden now I'm getting a steady paycheck, and I don't know what to do with all this money, and so they don't necessarily spend their money wisely at the younger stages. Probably around E5 and above is whenever you realize you need to do something safer with your money. Stop spending it, start saving it, invest it.
Have you ever been successful in working on an assumption of a VA loan?
No, I will never touch an assumption of a VA loan unless it was somebody assuming I mean, even then it wouldn't be mine because I'm a broker. An assumption is involved with, let's say this house is using Global Credit Union. This member wants to assume this house. They have to go to Global. I can't help them. It's completely under Global's control because this member is assuming the Global loan. And so I have never done it. I've seen people who have done it. MJ Mata has worked a couple of assumptions. She's a realtor with EXP. She would probably be the person I would point you to understand that process a little bit more.
What's the question about the assumable? I could probably answer it.
You know, I guess the question was that trying to understand, I just wondered if anyone has been successful with assumptions. When I looked into it, for example, with Global, they had a one year wait for Global to process an assumption, and like, who's gonna wait a year for because they really don't want that assumption to happen, so they hire someone in New York or someone on the East Coast to run the whole program, and it's done with stone tablets and chisels. No facts.
So it really depends on who the company is. I will say Global is a pain in the butt because they go through Senlar, I think it's the company name. So it's a third party that does their assumables. So it's not so much Global per se. But I've done Penny Mac and Freedom Mortgage, and I will say Freedom Mortgage was probably the easiest one. But just if you prepare, it doesn't really benefit the seller, I'll tell you that up front, unless they have just a really difficult property to sell. It might be like kind of weird, has like little tweaks and stuffs to it. Like, I don't know, but that would be a way of marketing it. And that's the route that I would do if I were to do an assumable with my seller. But as the buyer's agent, you'll have people who want to do an assumable. Right now, I will tell you, I mean, you're only doing an assumable for the interest rate, right? So if you are going on the market right now to do an assumable, your buyer needs to at least have 200,000 or more in cash to make it work. So that's food for thought, and that's conversation to have with your buyers before you jump into that. Is how much cash do you have on hand? And if they're like, oh, well, I only have 20,000, then assumable is not going to be the route to go.
Thank you, Helen.
How about Navy Federal Credit Union? How are they as far as assumptions in timelines? Have you ever worked with
So
them?
it depends who they have the loan service through. So I did one through Navy Fed, and we ended up working with Penny Mac, and they were fine.
Okay.
I will just prep you up. It took like 90 days. So that's
Yeah.
another conversation because the seller's going to want to, like right now, if I was a seller and I'm going on the market, I would probably say no to an assumable because I know my house is going to be snatched up in less than 3 days, or less than a week. And then I'm also going to be able to close in 30 days. But if I'm a seller, I can also do like a rent back right now and be done with it, right? So, I mean, it really depends on your seller and what's important for them. But essentially, it depends on the market. Like, last winter, I'm pretty sure there'd be a lot of people say, sure, I'll do an assumable, anything to sell my house, right? But it really depends on the market as well, and how much your seller's willing to wait. I will say Freedom Mortgage, Penny Mac, they're a little bit better 60 days on average. Once you get into global, I did one for 120 days. That's how long it took. So I would set the expectation and be like, hey, we're going to do assumable. It could take up to 120 days. And then it may take 60 or less. Who knows? But please, please set the expectation and make it like the worst case scenario.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. See, you gotta use each other. I just know that as a mortgage broker, I won't touch assumables because I don't work for an actual bank. I'm a broker, that's fine for me. Let's see.
So one question about that last one. Are they getting better about getting COEs in a reasonable amount of time? I remember before there was a while there that it took them forever to get their COEs. They didn't have them handy.
If a member doesn't have theirs handy, whoever their lender is can get it.
Okay.
I can log in and get it in 1 second.
Okay, good.
Now, depending on if there's ever been anything established or if they're currently active, it could take a little bit of time and I need information. But that member needs to know that, hey, I need to gather this information. And one of the pain points is that I need to know if, for example, if I had to go and get my COE and I've never been in and it has to get ordered, I have to go through and write down every single time I was on orders and all those dates and what type of orders I was on, because I have to submit that to the VA to get my COE. But typically, if they're not in that situation, I can get the COE pretty quick.
So that's really just their first time. After that,
They should have it established. Because like if they've already seen a lender and they've already received it from one lender, another lender can pick it up.
How does the benefit transfer? Let's say they own a home, they're buying another home. They need their eligibility for the new home. Does that transfer upon sale of the old home, or is that kind of how that works?
So they don't necessarily need to, you only get to sell back your loan to the VA one time. But that doesn't affect your ability to buy a second property. So for example, I had a buyer recently just sell their home and now they're buying a new home. Their benefit amount of 1.2 million hadn't been tapped yet. So they can buy another home without cashing back that one. Now let's say if they wanted to buy another property later down the road and now they're maxed, they can sell back that property that they sold to the VA to gain that money, that amount back into their eligibility amount. So you all been asking questions. This is great. What's the one thing you wish you felt more confident explaining to a military client?
It's a good question. I think it mostly comes in with having conversations about on-base housing versus off-base housing. So I don't really know as much as I probably should know about housing on base and what's available and what's not. I know that a lot of times it tends to be really difficult for them to get housing on base. But I don't want to tell them that and then have that not be true either. So they think I'm trying to convince them to buy a house,
I'm just getting a pin because this is one thing that I could add to the document that I'm gonna give you guys access to, is the pros and cons between on-base and off-base.
Yeah. And like, how available are they on JBear? Because again, I just basically tell them, you're just gonna kind of have to figure it out what's available and what's not available. But it seems like it's pretty difficult to get base housing here in Alaska.
So it depends on the season. The reason why I say that is because I've lived up here since 2008, and we went through a flow time where they were offering it to military housing to anybody who had any type of connection to base, because one of the brigades packed up and left, and were never coming back. So all those people who they had filled in housing now just vacated all of that. They weren't letting anybody move off base early at that time, and they could, because they needed to fill that spot. But then I've also been in a place where they're like, you want to move out early, go ahead, we'll waive the expectations or the requirements for you to move off quickly and do your BAH, and you won't have to pay the rest of your contract, we'll just cancel it.
Hmm.
So I've seen it in both. And on, if you guys want to be informed, one of the things that you all could do is have a conversation with Alaska Aurora Housing, I think is what it's called. It could be.
It is, yeah.
Just either have an insider go and ask them, or go and get informed so that you know what the housing situation is like on this. Because then you're more informed and then you can inform your clients better. That's what I would do. If a client came to me and asked me, for the first thing I would do is go to Alaska Housing. Or I'd ask one of my friends who lives on base, hey, do you know what the housing situation is like? And just go find someone. I know that MJ Mata, works at a VA rep building on base, which is tied to one of the housing offices, so you could be a good resource to get you that information as well.
Is there any kind of number that we could call to find out that information?
I would just look up online and see what Alaska or housing number is, and then just call them. Because they could answer and just say, yeah, we got a wait list coming right now. And so that's good information, especially if somebody who's PCSing in and then going, we think we'll just live on base.
Mhm.
Because this is stressful. It does mitigate a lot of the stress, but then living on base, in my opinion, is very stressful anyway. And then just getting to know what their situation is, getting what their whole entire like goals are. Do they ever want to invest? Are they ever interested in investing in real estate? That's a conversation that could lead them into wanting to buy, even if they're saying, oh, I'm only gonna do my 4 years and be done. Because the rotation up here is 3 to 4 years, depending on if they're married. And half the time, seeing people get married up there, so then 2 to 4 years.
I just seem to get asked a lot when people are coming here about base housing. I don't know the answers to that.
Or a housing. I would definitely contact them because it changes. It changes depending on what is happening, like if they're doing like when they started the mass deployments again, with this new Iran war, single soldier who lives in the house because he can, gone, they have to do something with that property. So they could have more opened up, but then what does that mean to that client? And so understanding what the pros and cons are, that's why I wrote that down. I was like, it's a good idea. Because when you have pros, one of the pros or one of the cons to living on base is that your house can get randomly inspected at any time. That sucks. That won't happen. But just being aware of those different things that are associated with living on and off base and being able to explain that to your client. Or you can even just take the cheat sheet that I'm going to give and say, hey, this is the list of pros and cons. If you handed that to me as a new client, I'd be like, thank you. Thank you for doing this one. Because that saves me a little bit of stress and I can just hand this off to my spouse and say, hey, take this. And so having those cheat sheets already prepared for them for an member.
Yeah, Matt St. John did a really good class for us on how to use their VA benefits to build wealth and buy homes in different locations. And I think the biggest con is that they don't get to use their housing loans to
Build that
build
equity.
wealth,
Build wealth.
equity, yeah. And it's
Yeah, I
just-
wish I would have done that when I moved up here and built went fourplex to fourplex to fourplex and
Mhm,
could have had a lot of fourplexes by now.
mhm.
But I didn't know that information. And so like really good information to know and share with new clients who are moving up here. Like use it. Because a BAH up here, one, know what BAH is. Know what it is for what rate, and if they have dependents, it changes, whether they have dependents or non-dependent. And I can also put that in the PC, the current BAH rate is because it's non-taxable income. You can gross it up, and it's income that they're going to lose if they move on base. Lose a portion of that when they're on base. If they're the only military member in their family, and not dual, like their spouse isn't military. If they're dual military, then they lose both of the individuals get single rate BAH. And they take one of the members and half of the other ones. And that could be almost $4,000 that they're losing for a property that's not worth $4,000. And they don't get that money back or see it. It's not equity built. And so just understanding that difference and being able to explain to them the money that they're losing and how it could be used based on what the market is like. Because renting is expensive up here too. So encouraging them whether they should rent or whether they should buy, whenever they bring up that conversation. Because obviously you're not gonna say, yeah, you should rent. They're gonna say, well, maybe I should rent, and then you can have that conversation with them. So here's the QR code to the military cheat sheet that I've created. You'll just have to enter your name and email, and then it'll pop into the link. And it's a Google Doc that I created, and it's something that I can continue adding to. This QR code here. And then that's my Facebook page. If you want to add me as a friend and ask me questions, if you ever have a military member who has those questions and you don't know those answers, feel free to just send them to me. I'll let them know, let me know that you sent them to me, so I can give them back to you. And just be a resource for anybody who has military questions, whether they're my client. Let's say you're working with a client who already has a lender. Like I care about the member. Just get them answers and correct answers. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had a VA person who says that their person said that they weren't eligible for the VA anymore. And I'm like, why? And they didn't know the answer. They were like, well, they just said I wasn't. And so I dug and I found out that they're actually eligible. They were actually, this particular client was actually eligible for $700,000 more on their VA loan. And then the misconception, like it's probably 50-50 with the misconception that you can only use your VA loan once. Definitely not true. Very, very, very false. Now, if you buy $1 million home, probably. But you can also resell it back to the VA and get that money back to buy something. So many different things that go into it and understanding it. Anytime I have a question, I usually just call the VA regional center. If my team doesn't know the answer. Tab and Aaron Scott are the ones who own Focus Home Lending, and they've been doing the business for 40. Aaron for over 40 years, Tab for over 30. So together almost 100. So it feels like. And they've been doing it up here in Alaska the whole time. So they've been doing it for a very long time. And have a very robust knowledge of hand jamming it through the 2008 crisis and continuing on. And so those are my first go-to whenever I have a weird funky situation. But when it comes to the military terminology and what's happening in the military and military administrative stuff, I'm very well versed in that. They usually ask me because I've been in it for so long. Did that link work?
I took a picture of it so I can look at it later.
Okay,
It worked beautiful, yeah.
perfect. And then thank you guys for having me here.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
for coming.
you.
I appreciate it.
Very informational.
Yeah.
I'd like to add this to our Facebook forum and then.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I put the slides on there as well? Or do
Yeah.
you want to keep those to yourself? Okay.
Make it a resource that's available. Because my beautiful name is on every single one of them. Or at least was part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of swag, I was gonna say I have swag.
Oh, we should try.
Good. That's back then.
I bet.
Here's a flashlight and a business card.
Oh, thank
My
you.
business cards are magnets. I was like, just don't want to afraid.